Hi everybody, my name is Max Maker and this week I'm building some nightstands for my bedroom, of course. So I ordered 20mm Baltic birch plywood and quite a lot of it. And I'm moving this around with my brand new manual forklift, and this is absolutely amazing because it lifts stuff up to a good height to work on, and I can cut this stuff right on here. So step one is making the boxes, and for that of course I need to cut down all of this plywood into nice manageable chunks, and I'm using my track saw for this because the sheets are far too heavy. I can barely lift them the way they are, and the table saw is tiny compared to the size of the sheets, so they would always hang down one side and maybe bind up the blade, so cutting them down with the track saw is the right way to do it. The overall plan is to cover everything with a nice veneer made from American walnut, and you can use a different walnut of course, but I want this one to match the hue and the color of the bed frame that I already have, so it's a slightly brown and reddish color. So this is a test fit right here, and it's really just a simple box. My first plan was to join everything with pocket holes because they're just really simple and strong. But I messed up the setting on this pocket hole jig. It's a great jig, but you have to set it up right. So my screws were protruding, which I found out later. So instead I used screws straight through, and these will be covered up with the veneer anyway, so it doesn't matter. So time for the first glue up, and I'm using this birch plywood. This is the premium stuff because this is like the go-to stuff in Germany. We don't use plywood to build houses unless you build a wooden house, which are not very common here in Germany at all. So we don't have the cheap plywood really, we just have this mostly. And this obviously is much better than what you would use to build a house with, because it's really straight and really solid and it doesn't have a lot of voids in it. Yeah, the glue up is always stressful, so you need a few clamps, and just this little finishing nailer is great to stop stuff from sliding around. It doesn't provide a lot of strength, but I can recommend it. And after working in here for just 2 hours, my workshop is a complete mess already. All the surfaces are covered in tools and dust. Do you have that problem? My workshop is only tidy when I'm not in it. So this is the bag, and I want to put some French cleats back here. If you've seen a few of my videos, you know that I'm a big fan of French cleats. They're very versatile, cheap, easy to make, but don't bother making them for this project because, as I found out later, they don't work because the cabinet is just too narrow. You need a longer cabinet, like a kitchen cabinet for this. It doesn't work the way I intended it to. I was thinking that it might not work, and I was right at the end. I should have stopped earlier, but maybe you can learn from my mistakes here. And I just used some metal brackets instead that I put underneath. Make these a little bit dome-shaped, so they protruding from the surface, so if you sand them, they become perfectly flush. It's always a good idea to make the corpus first, and then you can measure how wide it actually is, subtract the width of the rails, and then you know exactly how wide you have to make the drawer. So I already cut these off camera because, you know, cutting wood is not that interesting, and I'm going to join these with biscuits so they stop sliding around. If you want to know how to use these biscuits, there are plenty of tutorials online, no need for me to explain everything. Except for one tip, make sure you cut the biscuit on the right side, not as I have done here. And instead of biscuits you could use dowels or just screws, just like so. That works just as well, it's just a little bit more difficult to glue everything up. And for the bottom I cut this rabbit, I think it's called, so it's a little recess, and the corners I straightened them up just with some chisels. That's actually a lot of fun. Somehow working with chisels, it's amazing what you can get done with these and how precise they can be. And if you find yourself enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. I think that was straightforward so far, but here comes the really interesting bit, at least for me because I haven't done it before, putting the veneer on. This is American walnut, and it's just a piece of wood cut into very, very thin pieces. So first of all, I put a brand new blade into my box cutter, and then I cut everything to size. So you just use regular wood glue to cover everything, and I used a roller to spread it out evenly, because if you have too much on this on there, it could go through the veneer and show up on the other side, and that's a problem if you want to apply the stain, because the stain won't penetrate the glue, and then you have a bright spot basically, which should be dark brown in my case. But if you don't use any stain, it doesn't matter very much, because the glue normally has about the same color as any finish you would use anyway. It's good advice to plan ahead on how you're going to clamp this up and be prepared. I wasn't really, but it worked out fine still at the end. You can see that I really learned during this process. This looked like absolute rubbish. I just have 2 clamps pressing down on here, so I don't know how much a clamp exerts, maybe 200 kilograms. And here I've got like 10, so it's 2 tons versus 200 kilograms. It's the next morning. I unclamped everything and it's really nice. I trimmed off most of the extra plywood with a brand new razor blade, and then I sanded everything down with a sanding block, and that gave me some really crisp edges. I was very surprised how well this worked, and the edges came out almost perfectly, really. I didn't have a lot of tear out or anything like that. And to protect this side that's already done now, I covered it with masking tape and went to glue on the other side of the nightstand. The bottom doesn't get any veneer, and after this is just the top left. So next up was the top, and I cleaned everything up so I don't get any debris in my glue up. And the top plywood is 2.4 millimeters thick, or 1/10 of an inch. And I made it a little bit thicker, so in case I spilled some water on it, I might be able to sand it down, not sure. One problem was that these edges weren't straight, so I thought if I stick them together and then saw through the middle of it, it would get rid of any unevenness between the sheets. But it didn't work. Shit, that just made it worse. Oh no! So I consulted the internet, and there I saw people using something like this. It's just 2 straight edges. You put the veneer in between, clamp it down, and you can use a plane or some sandpaper to get a perfectly straight edge. At least the edge will be as straight as the plywood you have on top. But that worked out very well, and you can't see the seams anymore. And now Matthias Wandelt would say I used some regular yellow carpenter's glue, but somehow here in Europe it's always white. I've never had any yellow glue. Do you guys know why this is? Let me know in the comments. I guess it's just some marketing ploy to sell more of this stuff anyway. I cut the veneer too short on the second nightstand, but you can just take a little piece and then glue it on. You won't see the difference. To trim this thick veneer, you have to use a router with a round over bit, because your razor blade can't cut it anymore. And all of this tear out doesn't matter very much because of the thickness of the masking tape. I'm not cutting all the way to the edge, I'm sanding the rest of it. I was quite surprised how nice this came out. But of course I had some defects. Here the masking tape got pressed so hard against the wood that it actually bonded to it, and I teared out the wood with the masking tape. So now that the construction of the boxes is done, it's time to stain and to oil the wood to match the color of the bed. And it's a little bit of a reddish to brownish color. So for the very bright plywood, I'm going to use a dark red stain. And this is an oil stain that goes on very easily. You just wipe it on and wipe off the excess, and after a day it's dry and quite solid. And you can add 2 or 3 more layers to get a nice and even coat, and that will protect the drawer slide really well. For the outside cabinet I have to use a little bit of a different color. It's more of a brown tint because the walnut itself adds some color to this, so this matches better to the bed frame, which already has the red color. You know, the drawers don't matter that much. If you open them, it's probably nighttime anyway, so you don't see them. On this shot I forgot to shake the can, and that's why it comes out so beautifully, but it's supposed to come out as milky as this stuff. So it has some solids in there, and I think that's like a blend of different oils, and the solids, they react with the air, oxidize, and then they become a hard surface. And as always, take your rags and spread them out in a big area and let them dry, otherwise they can catch on fire. For the fronts of the nightstands, I want something really special. This is like the grille of a car, so I want to give them an Art Deco pattern and I want to paint it gold. So to make that pattern, I'm going to use my CNC, but obviously you could also use hand tools to make this. You know, if you've got time, you can carve something really beautiful, even with little experience. But I used the CNC. It wasn't as straightforward as you think. So that was a real disaster. First of all, over here it's more shallow than here, so I need to level the bed again. Then I accidentally cut over here and cut into several screws, so the cutter's broken. And the other thing is that it lost steps around this area. And I think that has to do with this stepper motor and these cables that might have a loose connection. So suddenly this is the troubleshooting video. What I did was I connected this continuity test to these cables and I shook them around to see if any of these have loose connections, but they didn't. Then I cleaned all of the rails because I thought maybe there's some dust or something like that in there that binds them up, so now it loses steps, but it wasn't the case either. Couldn't find anything wrong with it, but that's one of the reasons why I want to build a new CNC to make everything more reliable. So I found a mistake, finally. I recently swapped out this axis. It was one of these axes, and this has a 4mm pitch. So one revolution is 4mm. This one is 5mm, and I thought, what's the big difference? 1mm more, it's almost the same. But there's actually 25% more speed. So if I run this at 2000 millimeters per minute, which is my default, this motor cannot keep up. So let me run this now, and if I slap it, it will stall. It doesn't have enough power. But now if I run this at 1500 millimeters per minute, it doesn't stall. That's it. So easy. So as you can see, having a CNC doesn't mean it does all the work for you. You still have to do a lot of work for the CNC, like flattening the bed. And I put some oil sealant on there to seal up the MDF, so if I use water coolant, it doesn't soak into the MDF as much and it doesn't swell with changes in humidity. I think that's what stopped this from being level. So this is the second attempt of cutting the front now, and first I cut all the way around the perimeter. And I left some tabs to keep everything in place, and then I used a ball mill to cut the profile at the front. And that was quite easy. I just had to stay present and stay a little bit awake to make sure nothing catches on fire, and if anything breaks, to stop the machine before it breaks even more. So this cutting job took about 3 hours, I think, but I see no reason why you couldn't do this with a router if you build a little jig for it. Yeah, I put some primer on it, then I sanded some more, and then I could apply some gold paint. And that was something I was really looking forward to. Time to assemble the drawer slide, and I used these German-made slides. These are full extension slides and they don't have soft close or anything like that. They just stay closed once they're closed. They have a little bit of a positive stop. And I screwed them in all the way here at the bottom because then I had a reference point. Obviously if you just have one drawer slide, it's easy to position them. And you want these drawer slides to be extended a little bit inwards of the cabinet. So that way they get pulled in by the drawer with this little bit of a pull-in motion at the end. So I measured the distance that they have to be at, and I pulled out the slide a little bit and then marked the position of the holes on the drawer itself. Pre-drilled in, put in some screws, and then the position of the rails is fixed on the drawer. So now you can pull it out a little bit more and add some more screws on the left and the right, and then everything is perfectly aligned. And of course, somehow I managed to make one of the drawer slides too wide, so I cut a little bit off, put some more finish on there, and at the end you can't even see it. They are hidden by the slides, and you just look at the front. So to fix on the front, I used double-sided tape. That didn't work. so I took it off, and then I used the good stuff, the expensive stuff. That didn't work either, so I took that off. And I used hot glue, and hot glue works perfectly fine, so you can position everything, the drawer slide just in the right place, so it's flush with the top and the sides. And then you can put in some screws. And then you take the screws out again to remove all of the hot glue, because that creates a gap between the front and the drawer. Put everything back together and you're fine. This is done now, so we can mount it on the wall. This is my bedroom. Unfortunately, the window is a little bit offset, but what can you do? I can't change the house, but at least this house is made from concrete, which is nice because I can anchor anything to anywhere, and I know it will be a really good connection. I don't have to look for studs. And I use this laser to make sure both of the nightstands are the same height, and that's really helpful. I absolutely love this thing. It's much better than using water level. Yeah, some of you, I guess, might say these are too many holes, but the holes didn't cost me anything, and they made sure nothing came off. The French cleats did hold up, but I added some braces anyway, and underneath here I also added some ambient lights. And inside of the drawer sides, I also added some lights with some switches that are activated if you open the drawer. So then you have a little bit of a night light. You don't have to turn on the full lights. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope I inspire you to make something yourself today. Let me know what you think about this build. Please subscribe, write some comments, share this with your friends. I really appreciate that you're watching these videos, and also my supporters on Patreon. If you become one of them, that would be really nice. My name is Max Maker, and I make all kinds of stuff. Thanks for watching.